Hey, and welcome to the Deliberate Exchange. My name is Chelsea. I'm otherwise known as the Deliberate One, and I'm so happy that you are here listening. This is the first episode of 2026. How exciting! And I want to tell you a story. So on December 31st of 2018, I made a decision, and I think it's one that so many people do. Uh, I told myself starting January 1st, I'm not going to drink. I knew at that time that drinking was causing me problems. I knew that it was taking more than it was giving. That was the decision. That was the preparation. That's it. I didn't research anything. I didn't build in any support. I didn't understand what quitting would actually require of me, and certainly not to uh, stay quit or be sober. I just believed that if I wanted it badly enough, I would stop. Like it seemed really a simple concept, right? And then by January 4th of 2019, I said fuck it and I drank. And here's why. So it's one of these things that either something happened or nothing happened. Something when it came to drinking looked like a bad meeting, a disappointing outcome at work, a terrible date, another hard moment that I didn't know how to metabolize. And then nothing looked like boredom, restlessness, a need to um, kind of expand my energy enough to be around people because connection was actually what I was missing to myself and authentic connection to others. And I also didn't want to be with myself, with my thoughts, with the emotions that I didn't know what to deal with. And for context, like this is late 2018, early 2019. In 2017, I got divorced. I moved out on my own for the first time. So I was already dealing with all that kind of stuff. Now, at the time, I thought the problem was alcohol. What I didn't understand yet was that alcohol was just the relief mechanism. So let's talk about the truth about 2019. And we'll slow things down a little bit and I will be honest with you. 2019 definitely became the year that my drinking became a problem I could not ignore. It was one of those breaking points. And certainly not in a very dramatic movie style rock bottom kind of way. This isn't Sandra Bullock in 28 Days. It was definitely quieter and honestly way more dangerous. I was drinking every night, a couple glasses of wine after work, and certainly a lot more on weekends. I was definitely experiencing frequent blackouts, and it was often enough that they kind of stopped alarming me, and certainly because of our culture perpetuating the normalcy of blackouts, which is wild to think about. I didn't think much about it. I was making decisions I would never make sober. I put myself in situations that were not safe. I had no standards. I had no boundaries. I had no expectations for myself or for others. And I don't think people talk about this enough. It was not that everything exploded overnight. It was that my self-trust eroded slowly. And people sometimes ask, why didn't you just stop then? As if it's that easy. And I want to answer that honestly too, because I didn't yet have another way to regulate my nervous system. Alcohol was how I turned the volume down. It is how I shut my mind off. It's how I softened the edges of life. And I was never craving the alcohol itself. Now I know this. I was craving relief. And that distinction matters because when you misunderstand the problem, you end up applying the wrong solutions. So in 2019, I've talked about this particular part of my story and my experience. My stepfather was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And I want to name this carefully because he did end up dying later in 2019. And it wasn't that grief caused my drinking, but that stress, that compulsion to be on and managing the project of getting my parents to and fro the hospital and all that kind of stuff, it gave me permission to keep going. And nobody questioned it. No one told me to slow down. Pain made my drinking understandable. And I used that. 2019 gave me every excuse to drink and to keep drinking, and I took them. Now, there's something else that I want to name here because I see it a lot, especially in women, and it's the stop-start cycle. You stop for a few days, a few weeks, sometimes even longer, and then starting again. And it's not because you don't care, it's not because you're lying to yourself or because you lack discipline, but because change requires capacity. And most of us were never taught how to build that. I know I wasn't. Our nervous systems are wired for survival and not success, for familiarity and not transformation. So even when something is hurting us, even when we know, like fundamentally it is taking more than it is giving, the body will still reach for what feels familiar. Comfort doesn't mean healthy, it just means known. And alcohol is very, very good at creating a fast sense of comfort. And so are a lot of other things. And that's why this doesn't just apply to drinking. You can see this with people leaving relationships or changing careers, setting boundaries, learning how to rest, choosing yourself in a different capacity. Your intention can be 100% solid. But if the nervous system doesn't feel safe enough to sustain the change, it will pull you back into what it knows. And it's not to sabotage you, it's to protect you. Like, what a beautifully adaptive resource that we have in our system. But it's now learning how to use that so it doesn't quietly strip away at everything that we need to live those authentic, fulfilling lives that everybody wants. And this is why people say things like, I don't understand why I keep going back. I really did mean it this time. Like, I was doing so well. And you were. But willpower alone cannot override a nervous system that's already overwhelmed, already at capacity. When stress is high and capacity is low, we default. We reach for numbness, distraction, relief, familiarity, even when we want something different. Especially when we want something different. That is biology. And so when people try to quit drinking with nothing but willpower, like I did in 2019, they are asking their nervous system to do something it has not been taught how to do. How to sit with discomfort, how to sit with activation, with loneliness, grief, how to sit with boredom. No tools, no support, no regulation, just restraint. And restraint breaks. And so in January of 2020, I quit drinking. And this time was different. And it wasn't because I wanted it more, because I was stronger, not because I finally hit some dramatic rock bottom, but because I changed how I was doing it. I didn't just remove alcohol, I was starting to increase my capacity. I learned how to release stress from my body. I learned how my stress responses worked and how to change it. I started using breath work every single day. I was using cold exposure every single day. I was giving myself practices that gave my nervous system another way to settle. And I stopped doing it alone. Now, back then, community wasn't like a big program or a label. There certainly weren't as many resources as there are right now. And certainly nothing like She Walks, which like I would have been all over if that existed when I first quit drinking. But it did mean that I met my first sober friend. I met my buddy Brendan in an online support group, coincidentally in like the Pacific Northwest. And he was so kind, and he sent me his number and said, if you need anything, let me know, because he was a few months ahead of me in his sobriety. And that meant I had one person who understood, and I had one relationship that made this feel possible. And that mattered more than I knew at the time. And for additional context, like I am quitting drinking. I'm living alone in the city. And then a couple months after I quit drinking, then the world shuts down into the global pandemic. So having that person was really, really quintessential. Now, I want to talk about cravings for a second because it comes up all the time when people say, like, I didn't have any cravings when I quit. They often think that that means alcohol wasn't an issue for them or that people were craving the alcohol itself. Like, you are not craving a, you know, a Riesling or a Chardonnay or a Cab Sauv. Like, you're craving what alcohol does. The quiet, the pause, the relief. And when you build other ways to access those states, the cravings end up losing their grip. Now, if you are listening to this and thinking like, okay, it's not that bad. I'm still functioning. I can stop for a while. I just can't seem to stay stopped. I want you to hear this. You do not have to lose everything for this to matter. Progressive drinking doesn't always look dramatic. Like, I didn't wake up and decide I'm going to have an issue with alcohol or a problematic relationship with alcohol. Like, sometimes it looks like shrinking standards, less safety, less presence, less self-trust. And that's reason enough to pay attention. And January has a way of stripping things down. There's sometimes no distractions, no numbing, no noise. And what's left isn't failure, it's information. And so if January 4th feels tender for you like it did for me in 2019, if you are feeling restless and shaky and questioning, there's nothing wrong with you. Your nervous system is asking for safety, for support, for capacity. And when that comes online, change becomes possible and easily accessed. And then you can apply it to so many different areas of your life. So if this episode has resonated in any way, if you hear yourself in the story and the experiences that I've shared here and in the other work that I put out there, send me a message if you have any questions. If you want to share this episode, that would be very helpful because a lot of people live in the dark about this particular subject. They will wrestle with it internally. And sometimes it just takes seeing somebody else doing it and speaking honestly and openly about it that they're like, okay, like this might be something that I can explore. And then we can show them like how awesome life gets to be when you're not dulling everything in your life and your body. And you're opening up so much more capacity for so much more goodness in your life with one simple decision. But it does take work to maintain that. So, as I said, share if it's resonant. Send me a message if you're unsure of how to start. I do have a free resource that you can access. I will link it in the show notes. This is a guide that I put together for women who are contemplating their relationship with alcohol. And it gives you reasons why it might feel hard to get there. It gives you a bunch of podcast episodes that talk about the experience, and it gives you ways to kind of find community and all that kind of stuff. So I will link that, as I said, in the show notes. In the meantime, breathe it in, be deliberate, and please be good to yourself.